Whoa! What is that?
No way.
The laughter echoed across the training grounds of Naval Special Warfare Center as Rodriguez pointed directly at the woman's exposed forearm. "Yo, check this out. She's got numbers tattooed like a barcode." His voice dripped with mockery as he stepped closer, towering over her smaller frame. "What is that? Your Starbucks loyalty code?" The group of SEAL trainees erupted in laughter. One of them pulled out his phone, pretending to scan her arm like a grocery store item. "Beep! Sorry, ma'am, this product seems defective." Elena Reeves stood perfectly still, her face revealing nothing as Rodriguez continued his performance. Seriously, though, who tattoos random numbers on their arm? Trying to look tough with some prison ID? Or maybe it's your rejection code from the last time you tried to play soldier. The California sun beat down on the Coronado training grounds where 24 elite warriors in training surrounded one woman. None of them recognized what those numbers meant. None of them knew that in exactly 20 minutes, everything about this morning would change forever. Before diving deeper into this incredible story, I have to ask, have you ever witnessed someone being completely misjudged based on appearance? Maybe you've seen someone dismissed as weak, only to discover they were the strongest person in the room? Drop your experiences in the comments below. I personally read every single one and love hearing how appearances deceived you. And if stories about hidden warriors and secret operators fascinate you like they do me, please hit that thanks button. Your support helps us uncover more of these classified tales and bring light to the unsung heroes who operate in the shadows. Every contribution makes a real difference in telling their stories. Elena continued checking her gear with methodical precision, each movement economical and purposeful. She ran her hands over the obstacles course equipment, testing weight distribution points that most trainees never even noticed. Rodriguez, standing at 6 feet 2 inches of pure arrogance, blocked her path as she moved toward the starting line. His buddies flanked him like predators sensing weakness. "First day trying to hang with the big boys?" Rodriguez's voice carried across the training area, ensuring maximum audience. "Let me guess. Some women's empowerment program told you that you could be anything, so you thought you'd try being a SEAL?" The laughter from his group encouraged him to continue. "That's adorable. Really? But this isn't yoga class, sweetheart." Chief Webb observed from his position near the timing station, his weathered face revealing nothing. The senior instructor had seen thousands of trainees come through these grounds, and he knew the unwritten rule. Let them sort out their own pecking order. But something about the way this woman moved caught his attention. There was a fluidity to her movements that didn't match the nervous energy of a typical first-timer. Elena glanced at her watch, an old G-Shock with 3 distinctive parallel scratches across its face. She noted the time, 07:45, then resumed her preparation. When she examined her rifle, she didn't follow the standard operating procedure drilled into every trainee. Instead, her hands moved in a different pattern, checking points of failure that weren't in any manual. "Earth to barcode, girl!" Rodriguez snapped his fingers in front of her face. "I'm talking to you. Maybe those numbers scrambled your brain?" He turned to his audience, gesturing dramatically. "I mean, what kind of person gets random digits tattooed on their arm? Let me guess. Your ex-boyfriend's social security number? Or wait, maybe it's how many times you've failed basic training?" One of the other trainees, a younger man trying to impress the group, chimed in. "Maybe it's her body count. You know, how many participation trophies she's collected." The group howled with laughter. Elena finally looked up, meeting Rodriguez's eyes for the first time. Her gaze was steady, almost unnervingly calm. "Are we running the course or talking about it?" Her voice was quiet, but carried an edge that made a few of the trainees shift uncomfortably. "Oh, she speaks!" Rodriguez threw his hands up in mock surprise. "And with such authority, too! Tell you what, Princess, ladies first on the O course. Show us what those CrossFit classes taught you." He made an exaggerated bow, gesturing toward the starting line. "I'll wait my turn," Elena replied, returning to her gear check. Rodriguez's face darkened at the dismissal. In his world, backing down from a challenge was a sign of weakness, and this woman had just confirmed every prejudice he held. "Of course you will. Probably need time to practice your Instagram poses for when you fail the first obstacle." Chief Webb noticed something the others missed: the way Elena distributed her weight when she stood, keeping her center of gravity low and balanced. It was subtle, the kind of thing that took years to develop into muscle memory. He'd seen that stance before, but not in SEAL training. That was something else entirely. Elena adjusted the specialized tactical timepiece on her wrist. Its military-grade construction featuring encrypted GPS capabilities, originally developed for deep cover operations, but now standard issue for Tier 1 units. The watch's unique biometric sensors continuously monitored vital signs, a technology that cost more than most cars, but proved invaluable when operating in denied areas. "Nice watch," one of the trainees noticed. "Did you buy that at the military surplus store too, along with whatever tough girl starter kit you're wearing?" Rodriguez seized on this new angle of attack. "That's what this is, isn't it? Some stolen valor fantasy? You watched a few Navy SEAL documentaries, bought some gear online, got some random numbers tattooed, and thought you could just show up and play warrior?" His voice had taken on a harder edge. "You know what? I'm actually doing you a favor here. Better to quit now before you embarrass yourself on the course." The obstacle course at Coronado was legendary, a brutal combination of walls, ropes, barbed wire, and water hazards that broke even the strongest candidates. The current record stood at 4 minutes and 39 seconds, set 8 years ago by a SEAL who went on to earn the Medal of Honor in Afghanistan. "Time to put up or shut up," Rodriguez announced as the group moved toward the course. "I'll even make this interesting. I'll run it first, show you how it's done. Then you can follow, if you're still here." He pulled off his shirt, revealing the physique of someone who lived in the gym. "Try to keep up, barcode. Maybe you'll learn something about what real operators look like." Elena remained silent, but those paying attention noticed her eyes tracking across the course with analytical precision. She wasn't looking at it like a challenge to overcome. She was looking at it like a problem to solve. Rodriguez exploded off the starting line with the confidence of someone who'd run this course dozens of times. His form was textbook SEAL training, powerful, aggressive, direct. He attacked each obstacle head-on, using raw strength and determination to power through. His buddies cheered and called out times as he progressed. "That's how it's done!" someone shouted, as Rodriguez cleared the cargo net in record time. "Show her what real training looks like." Chief Webb kept his eyes on Elena. She hadn't moved from her position, but her entire demeanor had shifted. The casual looseness was gone, replaced by something he'd seen before in operators preparing for a mission. She was visualizing, running the course in her mind, finding the optimal path. Rodriguez finished with a flourish, chest heaving, sweat streaming down his face. 4 minutes, 32 seconds, a personal best that put him within striking distance of the course record. He stood at the finish line, arms spread wide, accepting the congratulations of his peers. 4:32, he shouted toward Elena. 7 seconds off the record. That's what years of real training looks like. Still want to embarrass yourself? Or are you ready to admit you don't belong here? Elena stepped to the starting line without a word. The sudden silence was deafening, as everyone realized she was actually going to attempt it. Even those who hadn't participated in the mockery found themselves curious about what would happen next. "This should be good," Rodriguez muttered, pulling out his phone. "Anyone want to bet how long before she quits? I've got $20, says she doesn't make it past the first wall." Chief Webb raised his hand. "Standards are standards. Everyone runs." He looked at Elena. "On your mark." Elena rolled her shoulders once, then settled into a stance that was subtly different from what they taught at Bud's. Her weight was distributed differently. Her breathing had shifted to a rhythm Webb couldn't quite place. When she exploded forward, it wasn't with the aggressive power Rodriguez had displayed. Instead, she moved like water finding the path of least resistance. The first wall approached. Where Rodriguez had muscled his way up with upper body strength, Elena hit it at an angle, using momentum and foot placement to flow up and over with minimal effort. The movement was so smooth that several trainees did double takes. "Lucky start," Rodriguez said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Elena approached the rope climb differently too. Instead of the standard seal technique, she used a method that conserved energy, wrapping the rope around her leg in a pattern that provided maximum friction with minimal effort. She ascended faster than seemed possible for someone her size. "What the hell?" one of the trainees whispered. "That's not in any manual I've seen." The cargo net was where Rodriguez expected her to struggle. The heavy rope squares required significant upper body strength to navigate quickly. But Elena read the net like a map, finding the points where the rope was tautest, using the physics of the structure against itself. She crossed it in half the time Rodriguez had taken. By the time she reached the water hazard, the entire group had gone silent. This wasn't luck or beginner's enthusiasm. Every movement was calculated, efficient, purposeful. She moved through the course like someone who had spent years perfecting the art of movement under pressure. Chief Webb glanced at his stopwatch and felt his pulse quicken. She was on pace to do something extraordinary. Elena hit the final obstacle, a 20-foot rope climb straight up without any sign of fatigue. But this was where her unusual technique became most apparent. She didn't climb it. She flowed up it, using a combination of leg locks and core rotation that generated upward movement with minimal arm involvement. She touched the bell at the top and descended even faster, landing with bent knees that absorbed the impact perfectly. The timer stopped at 3 minutes and 47 seconds. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena had just destroyed the course record by 52 seconds, making Rodriguez's impressive time look pedestrian by comparison. But more than that, she'd done it using techniques none of them had seen before. That's impossible," Rodriguez stammered. There's no way." He looked around for support, but even his loyal followers were staring at Elena with newfound respect. She cheated. She had to. Nobody's that fast on their first run. Chief Webb stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Time stands as recorded. 3:47. He looked at Rodriguez. "Unless you have specific evidence of cheating, we move to rifle qualification." Rodriguez's face flushed red. "This is bullshit. She probably ran this course before, practiced for months. There's no way." "Rodriguez," Webb's voice cut through the protest like a blade, "you're embarrassing yourself. Take your position at the range." As the group moved toward the rifle qualification area, Elena noticed several trainees giving her curious looks. One of them, bold enough to walk beside her, asked quietly, "Where did you learn to move like that?" "Check 6, Elena replied automatically as they passed a corner, using terminology that made the trainee frown. "Check 6? That's not Navy terminology. That's—" But Elena had already moved ahead, leaving the question hanging in the air. As she walked, her training shirt shifted, revealing a glimpse of a scar on her shoulder. It wasn't ragged like shrapnel or a bullet wound. It was precise, surgical, the kind of scar that came from very specific medical procedures. Rodriguez rallied his bruised ego as they reached the range. "All right, so she can run an obstacle course. Big deal. Any CrossFit junkie can learn to climb ropes. Let's see how she handles actual weapons. This is where real operators are separated from the pretenders." The rifle range at Coronado was a standard 50-yard setup with metal targets for basic qualification. Each shooter would fire 10 rounds at their target, with grouping and accuracy determining their score. Rodriguez made sure to select the lane directly next to Elena, his intentions clear. "Ever even held a real weapon before, Barcode?" he asked as they prepared their rifles. "This isn't some video game. This is an M4 carbine, standard issue for real warriors. The recoil might be a bit much for someone your size." Elena began her weapon inspection with movements that flowed like water. Her hands found every critical point without conscious thought. Bolt carrier group, trigger assembly, barrel alignment. But again, her pattern was different. She checked things in an order that wasn't taught at any basic training facility. That's when Major Harrison arrived. The former Delta Force operator now served as the range master, and his appearance usually meant someone important was visiting. But today, he was here for a different reason. Webb had sent him a text, just 3 words. "Come see this." Harrison took position behind the firing line, his experienced eyes immediately focusing on Elena. He watched her prep routine with growing interest. The way she adjusted her sling, the angle of her support hand, the micro-adjustments to her shooting position, none of it was standard SEAL training. During weapon preparation, Elena retrieved advanced ballistic calculation equipment, including a military-grade rangefinder with atmospheric sensors designed for extreme long-range engagements. The specialized shooting gloves she wore incorporated pressure-sensitive material originally developed for combat surgeons, enabling precise trigger control even in adverse conditions. "Fancy gear won't help if you can't shoot straight," Rodriguez commented loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't Instagram, princess. You actually have to hit the target here." Elena finished her preparation and settled into her shooting position. Rodriguez, still trying to establish dominance, accidentally knocked over his ammunition box, sending rounds scattering across Elena's area. "Oops, my bad," he said with false sincerity. "Here, let me help you pick those up. Wouldn't want you to get your hands dirty." As he reached down, he intentionally bumped Elena's rifle, trying to disturb her setup. But Elena's hand shot out, steadying the weapon with reflexes that spoke of years of muscle memory. In one fluid motion, she gathered the scattered rounds, loaded her magazine, and returned to her shooting position. "Range is hot," the safety officer announced. "Shooters, you may commence firing when ready." Rodriguez immediately opened fire, his shots ringing out in rapid succession. His grouping was respectable, all 10 shots within a 6-inch circle. He looked over at Elena with a smirk, expecting to see her struggling with the weapon's recoil. But Elena hadn't fired yet. She was breathing steadily, her body completely still except for the microscopic adjustments she made to track some invisible wind pattern. Harrison leaned forward, recognizing something in her stance that he'd seen in only a handful of elite shooters. When Elena finally squeezed the trigger, the shot broke so cleanly that the rifle barely moved. She worked the bolt with economy of motion, chambering the next round without disturbing her sight picture. The second shot followed, then the third, each one flowing into the next like a perfectly choreographed dance. Rodriguez's smirk faded as he watched the impacts through his spotting scope. Elena's shots weren't just hitting the target, they were hitting the same hole. By the fifth shot, it was clear something extraordinary was happening. By the 10th, a hushed crowd had gathered. "Check target 2, Harrison ordered, his voice betraying his amazement. The range officer examined Elena's target and called back. 10 shots, 1 ragged hole. Measurement is, Jesus Christ, .73 inches at 50 yards. The silence was deafening. That kind of precision was beyond elite. It was almost supernatural. Rodriguez's jaw hung open as he stared at the target, then at Elena, then back at the target. That's not possible, he muttered. She must be using match ammunition. No way she's doing that with standard ball. Harrison stepped forward and picked up one of Elena's spent casings. Standard M855 ball ammunition, he announced. Same as everyone else is using. He looked at Elena with an expression that mixed recognition with disbelief. Ma'am, that kind of shooting. Where exactly did you train? Elena was already safing her weapon, her movements automatic and precise. Here and there, she replied quietly. But Harrison wasn't looking at her face anymore. His eyes had locked onto the tattoo on her forearm, those numbers that everyone had mocked. His face went pale, and he took an involuntary step backward. Stand by, he said to the range officer, then pulled out his phone and stepped away from the group. His voice was low, urgent, but a few words carried on the wind. Need confirmation. Those numbers. Impossible. Thought they were all dead. Rodriguez, desperate to salvage his crumbling superiority, announced loudly, Anyone can get lucky once. Let's see her do it again. Better yet, let's move to combat drills. That's where real operators prove themselves. But the bravado in his voice fooled no one. Something had fundamentally shifted on the range. The woman they'd mocked for her barcode tattoo had just demonstrated a level of marksmanship that most of them would never achieve in their entire careers. As Elena stood up from her shooting position, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing more of the tattoo. The numbers were clear now, 77-349-61. To most, they still looked random, but Harrison had made his phone call, and wheels were already in motion. In less than 10 minutes, the morning's entertainment would transform into something none of them expected. The countdown had begun, though only Elena knew it. She'd maintained her cover as long as possible, but sometimes the mission required revealing just enough truth to accomplish the objective. And her objective was about to walk through that gate with stars on his shoulders and questions that would change everything. The final test would be close quarters battle, the kill house. Rodriguez gathered his remaining supporters as they moved toward the structure, a maze of rooms designed to simulate urban combat scenarios. His earlier confidence had cracked, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat. CQB is where it all comes together, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Speed, violence of action, teamwork. This isn't about fancy shooting or parkour tricks. This is about warrior mindset. He looked directly at Elena. Since you're so skilled, how about we make this interesting? You can clear the house solo while my team does it properly. Let's see how your mysterious training holds up in a real combat simulation. Chief Webb started to object, but Elena spoke first. Time limit? Rodriguez's eyes lit up, thinking he'd found her weakness. Standard clearing time for a 5-man team is 2 minutes. Solo? Most instructors can't do it under 4, but hey, take all the time you need. Elena checked her weapon and spare magazines with the same fluid efficiency she'd shown all morning. Start the clock when I breach. The kill house at Coronado was a notorious test. 23 rooms across 2 floors, with pop-up targets representing threats and civilians. Every angle had to be cleared. Every corner checked. One missed threat, meant failure. One civilian casualty meant automatic disqualification. Rodriguez positioned himself at the observation window with a clear view of multiple rooms. This should be educational. Watch and learn how quickly she falls apart when the timer started. Elena hit the breach point like a ghost given form. The door exploded inward, and she flowed through the fatal funnel with a speed that defied physics. Her weapon tracked threats before they fully appeared, rounds finding center mass with mechanical precision. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. "She's not clearing rooms, she's dancing through them." Elena moved unlike anything they'd seen in training videos or real operations. She used angles that shouldn't exist, positions the textbook said were impossible. Her footwork created geometries that gave her millisecond advantages, turning corners with her weapon already aligned to threats that hadn't even registered to the observers. Room after room fell to her systematic approach. But it wasn't SEAL methodology. It wasn't Delta or Green Beret doctrine. It was something else entirely, something that had been refined in places that didn't exist on any map. Harrison had returned from his phone call and now stood frozen at the observation window. "That's not possible," he muttered. "That technique, I saw it once in Syria, but the unit that used it was 47 seconds. Elena had cleared 3/4 of the house in 47 seconds. Targets were dropping so fast the computer system could barely keep up. No civilian casualties, no missed threats. Perfect violence executed with surgical precision. Rodriguez's phone clattered to the floor. His face had gone pale as he watched Elena flow through the kill house like death itself. This wasn't training. This wasn't even elite performance. This was something beyond their understanding. The final room approached, traditionally the hardest, with multiple angles and conflicting fields of fire. Elena paused for a fraction of a second outside the door, and in that moment, everyone saw her lips move. She was counting down from 3. She breached on 0, and what happened next would be debated in the instructor lounge for years. Elena engaged 5 targets in under 2 seconds, her body contorting through positions that seemed to defy human anatomy. The last shot came as she slid across the floor, firing upside down at a target everyone else had missed. A partially concealed threat in the corner ceiling. Time, 1 minute, 12 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena stood in the center of the final room, weapon at low ready, breathing as steadily as if she'd just finished a light jog. Around her, the kill house's sophisticated targeting system confirmed what everyone had witnessed. A perfect run at impossible speed. That's when they heard the helicopters. 2 Black Hawks appeared over the horizon, approaching fast and low. These weren't training birds. They carried the distinctive modifications of operational aircraft. Rodriguez and his group scattered as the helicopters circled once before settling onto the adjacent field. "All personnel, stand fast," Chief Webb's voice carried across the training ground. "Do not approach the aircraft." But Elena had already safed her weapon and was walking toward the lead helicopter with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The side door slid open, and out stepped Commander Jake Sullivan, commanding officer of SEAL Team 6. Behind him, 3 more officers emerged, their uniforms heavy with ribbons that told stories of operations in places most people couldn't pronounce. Sullivan's eyes locked onto Elena immediately. More specifically, they locked onto her exposed tattoo. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, then something that looked almost like awe. "Attention on deck!" The command rang out across the training ground. Every trainee snapped to attention, including Rodriguez, whose legs seemed barely able to support him. Sullivan walked directly to Elena, ignoring everyone else. When he stopped in front of her, the silence was so complete you could hear the helicopter's engines ticking as they cooled. Then, in a move that defied every protocol, every tradition, every understanding of military hierarchy, Commander Jake Sullivan raised his hand in a salute. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the field. The collective intake of breath from 24 SEAL trainees sounded like a small hurricane. A commander was saluting someone they'd been mocking all morning. Rodriguez's knees actually buckled. Elena returned the salute crisply. "Commander." "Unit 77, Sullivan said, his voice filled with something between reverence and disbelief. "I thought you were all KIA. The report said the entire unit was lost in Raqqa." "The reports were necessary," Elena replied simply. Harrison stepped forward, finally understanding what he'd witnessed. 77? That's impossible. That unit was... He stopped, unable to finish the classified thought in front of the trainees. Sullivan turned to address the confused crowd. "What you're looking at, gentlemen, is a ghost. Unit 77 was a black operations unit so classified that most people with top-secret clearance don't know it existed. All female operators selected from across every branch, trained for missions that conventional forces couldn't execute." Rodriguez found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "All female?" "The tattoo," Sullivan continued, pointing to Elena's arm. "It's not random numbers. It's a designation code. 77 for the unit, 349 for the operative number, 61 for the year of commissioning." He looked back at Elena. "You're Ghost 349. You wrote the urban warfare manual we use. You developed the CQB techniques that we teach to our most advanced operators." "That's not possible," Rodriguez said weakly. She's just... Just what?" Elena asked, speaking directly to him for the first time since the morning began. "Just a woman with a tattoo you didn't understand?" Harrison pulled out a sealed folder he'd retrieved during his phone call. "Ma'am, your actual records. I had to call in favors just to get confirmation you existed." He opened it briefly, showing glimpses of operations in places that weren't supposed to have American presence. 147 confirmed operations, 5 Medal of Honor nominations, all classified. The Raqqa operation alone. "That's enough," Elena said quietly. "They don't need those details." Sullivan shook his head in amazement. "When the unit was reportedly destroyed, we lost capabilities we've never been able to replace. The Pentagon spent 3 years trying to recreate what you all could do. We failed every time." He paused. "Why are you here?" "Why now?" "I'm here for instructor evaluation," Elena said. "The standard process, just like anyone else." "Standard?" Sullivan almost laughed. "Ma'am, you wrote half the procedures we use. You established protocols that saved hundreds of lives. There's nothing standard about this." Rodriguez had slowly moved forward, his face a mixture of shame and awe. When he spoke, his voice shook. I mocked you. I said you were playing soldier. He couldn't finish. Elena looked at him with surprising compassion. "You saw what you expected to see. That was the point." She addressed the group. Unit 77 was built on the premise that the enemy's assumptions could be weapons. They see a woman and assume weakness. They see smaller stature and assume inability. Those assumptions killed them every time. "The compound in Raqqa," Sullivan said. "The intelligence failure. We thought you all died in the bombing." 3 did, Elena said quietly, and for the first time, emotion flickered across her face. She touched the G-Shock watch with its 3 parallel scratches. "Mitchell, Chen, and Vasquez. We got the rest out. But the political situation, it was decided that Unit 77 would remain KIA. Easier than explaining how a unit that didn't exist had been compromised by intelligence leaks. Webb finally spoke. "You've been operational this whole time?" "Retired," Elena corrected. "Officially dead. Living quiet lives with our memories and our scars." She looked at her tattoo. "But skills like ours, they don't really let you rest." So when the opportunity came to pass on what we learned, to maybe prevent other units from walking into the same traps, "You came here to teach," Harrison finished. Elena nodded. "If you'll have me." The next hour passed in a blur. Rodriguez publicly apologized, his voice breaking, as he realized how badly he'd misjudged the situation. Other trainees approached with mixture of respect and embarrassment, asking questions about techniques they'd witnessed. Elena answered some, deflected others, always maintaining the operational security that had kept her and her unit alive. As the sun reached its peak, Sullivan made the formal offer. "The Navy would be honored if you'd accept a position as Advanced Tactics Instructor. Full clearance restoration, your choice of assignments." "I'll teach," Elena said, "but on my terms. No special treatment, no pedestals. I'm here to make sure the next generation doesn't pay the prices we paid." That evening, the base auditorium filled with curious personnel as word spread about the morning's events. Elena stood at the front, no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be less than she was. She spoke about Unit 77's concept, how being underestimated had been their greatest weapon, how they'd turned society's prejudices into tactical advantages. "Every assumption the enemy makes is an opportunity," she explained. "They saw women and thought weak. We saw women and thought invisible. They saw smaller stature and thought incapable. We saw it and thought able to move through spaces they couldn't. Your greatest perceived weakness can become your defining strength." Rodriguez sat in the front row, absorbing every word. His transformation from tormentor to student was complete. When Elena finished, he was the first to stand and applaud. As the crowd dispersed, Elena found herself alone with Sullivan and the command staff. They discussed details, curriculum she'd develop, techniques she'd introduce, the careful balance between sharing knowledge and protecting classified methods. "There's one thing I need to know," Sullivan said as they wrapped up. "The rest of Unit 77. Are they alive?" Elena confirmed. "Living their own quiet lives, maybe ready to stop being ghosts." She smiled slightly. "The world's changed since Raqqa. Maybe it's time for the dead to teach the living." Later that evening, Sullivan made the announcement in the packed auditorium. "Effective immediately, Elena Reeves will serve as lead instructor for Devagru selection courses, specializing in advanced urban operations and unconventional warfare tactics." The room erupted in applause. Rodriguez stood in the front row, leading the ovation. His transformation from tormentor to advocate was complete. He'd spent the afternoon telling anyone who'd listen about the morning's lessons, about assumptions and humility, and the price of prejudice. As personnel filed out, Elena found herself helping a younger trainee who'd been struggling with the CQB footwork she'd demonstrated. She guided his movements with patient corrections, never raising her voice, never showing frustration. "Respect is earned in silence. Dvan, done," she told him as his technique finally clicked. "Remember that." The next morning came crisp and clear. Elena stood at the base entrance, checking her G-Shock one final time. Her fingers traced the 3 parallel scratches across its face: Mitchell, Chen, and Vasquez. Their sacrifice had meaning now, carried forward in every lesson she'd teach. Rodriguez approached with 5 other trainees. Without a word, They formed a line and rendered perfect salutes as Elena walked past. She nodded once in acknowledgement, but didn't stop. The gesture said everything. Respect earned, lessons learned, traditions changing. As she reached the parking area, the rising sun caught her tattoo, making the numbers seem to glow. 77-349-61. No longer a barcode to be mocked, but a symbol of sacrifice and service that few would ever fully understand. Behind her, someone asked Rodriguez what he'd learned. That there are 11 more like her out there, he said quietly. Makes you wonder who else we walk past every day without knowing what they really are. Elena smiled and drove away as morning PT began. In her rearview mirror, the training grounds shrank, but the lessons she'd planted would grow. Tomorrow, she'd formally teach the next generation. Today had been about teaching them to see. Her tattoo caught the sunlight on the steering wheel, numbers telling a story of service and sacrifice. Somewhere, 11 other women carried similar marks. The legend of Unit 77 would live in whispered conversations of trainees who'd learned the hardest lesson. The most dangerous warriors don't always look the part. Sometimes, a simple tattoo can change everything.